to know how to live the way God intended? Then this podcast series is tailor-made for you. David Taverner asks Bible expert Mike Beaumont why Jesus spoke about living God's way using parables. And Mike will sum up what this means for us today in just 3 words.
In Matthew's Gospel at chapter 13, we've reached probably one of the most well-known parables of Jesus, the parable of the sower. But helpful as always to know perhaps where he was speaking this, to whom he was speaking, and so on.
Yeah, very well-known parable at the beginning of a whole selection of parables that Matthew gathers together for us, that Jesus seems to have taught together on a particular occasion. And they're all about the nature of God's kingdom. What is God's kingdom like? How do things work in his kingdom? We've called this whole series Living God's Way. And this collection of parables is very much how to live God's way and how God's kingdom operates, and therefore how we need to line our lives up with it if we're going to live life to its best. Now, where is it set? Well, we're still in Galilee. We're still by the lakeside, and chapter 13 begins with the words, that same day Jesus went out of the house. Okay, so it's near Capernaum because the house is the house of Peter, where he'd made his base when he left his hometown in Nazareth. And such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables. So he's acquired a sort of floating pulpit from the day. Remember, some of his followers had been fishermen, so there would have been plenty of boats around that they could have used. So he's on a sort of floating pulpit. Now, there's actually an area still today that they call the Cove of the Parables, which is just to the west of Capernaum. It's between Capernaum and Tabgha. Tabgha's only, 3 kilometres, 2 miles away. So it's literally just down the road outside Capernaum. And there's this horseshoe-shaped cove where Jesus could very have easily sat in a boat and his voice projected to a large crowd gathering there that are on the shore as he's there on his floating pulpit, teaching them about what does God's kingdom look like and what principles do you need to line your life up with if you're going to get the most out of living life God's way.
And interestingly, he's in a boat, a fishing boat probably, talking about farming, because this is the parable where he says, then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Is this farmer a little bit careless?
Sounds like it from our angle of things. No, Jesus is using here, as he does so often, a very familiar picture every day that people could understand. This is how farming would have been done in those days. It's what's called broadcasting, to use a technical term. And it was the picture of a farmer walking up and down his field with a sack over his shoulder, and he's thrusting his hand deep into the sack to get the seed, flinging it out with his right hand, doing the same with his left, flinging it out, walking up and down these narrow paths, flinging out seed left, right and centre as he went along. And the way they did it in Bible times was they scattered the seed and then they ran a plough over it to turn the soil on top of it. So it's a picture that people would have seen so often. Remember, the vast majority of Jesus's listeners were the sort of peasant farmers of the day. They were the ordinary people of the day. Most people were involved in farming in some way or other. The vast majority of the Roman Empire were involved in smallholder farming or larger halt farming. So It's interesting that when Jesus does this teaching, he uses parables that relate to that level of society. He's not going for the sort of intellectual arguments to reach the elite. So it's a very common picture here of how broadcasting would have been done in those days.
So that's how seed would have been sown. And so Jesus is sort of picking up on the outcome of that process.
Yeah, exactly. So, as he goes through in his story, what have we got? Well, we've got one type of seed, one farmer, but the different outcome for the seed is going to depend on where it lands, of course. So in his picture, we've got 4 places that it lands. First of all, the path. Now, these would have been not formal paths, but just those hard strips of ground that have become hard baked through people walking over them over the years. Here's the first picture of the farmer walking down. He's scattering, and inevitably, as he scatters his seed, some of the seed lands on the path itself. It's hard. The seed can't get in. So the birds come quickly and, have a nice feast. Thank you very much. Some of the seeds, secondly, will fall on what the NIV calls rocky places. Now, this is those areas where there would just have been very thin layers of soil over the rock bed, so not much depth to it. And so it would be hard for the plant to get its roots down, so it could easily wither when the sun came up. It could easily get scorched. Thirdly, some of the seed inevitably fell among thorns. Now, we do know that Palestinian farmers really didn't like weeding. They tended to leave their weeds to grow. So what happened? Well, as the young seed grew, inevitably, some of it got choked by the weeds that were there. But, Jesus says, still other of that seed fell on good soil. It's deep, it's rich, it's ready to receive the seed, and it produces a crop 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. By the way, to put that into context, a really good return for a farmer in those days would have been 7 or 8. That was average.
Oh, as low as that?
Yeah. And if you got a 15-fold return, you would have thought you had been blessed beyond measure.
Oh.
So even the lowest return here, 30, is double beyond what would be seen as fairly miraculous.
Right. So a really good return in his story.
Yeah, absolutely. This is phenomenal growth. So we've got 4 types of growth coming from the one seed that is planted. And Jesus ending with a sort of rather enigmatic challenge. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And what he's wanting to do is, what are you going to do with it? Listen. It's a way of saying, think about this, grasp it, get hold of the message. There's something deep here.
And the point is, his audience are ordinary people. They're not necessarily farmers, but they would understand this picture language.
Absolutely, because even if you weren't a farmer, you would have seen this happening. It happened all the time. It was a part of life. Jesus loved rooting his parables in ordinary, everyday life, that people say, oh, yeah, I've seen that. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. And then he draws out a spiritual implication from it.
So what does he want them to learn?
Well, that's exactly what the disciples sort of want to know, because first of all, they go on to say, why do you speak to the people in parables? And asking questions were a very common form of learning in those days. So they want to know, Jesus has said, hey, I hope you get this parable. And they come back and say, first of all, so why exactly do you keep using parables?
Yeah, couldn't you speak a bit more plainly?
Yeah, and you would have thought he would really. And the answer that Jesus gives is actually quite shocking. Because, the answer we would expect is, well, I'm giving them easy pictures to help them understand. But actually what he goes on to say is, I'm using pictures so they don't understand.
Sort of code almost.
Yeah, so they have to think about this. It'd be good to perhaps read on from verse 11.
Yeah. So where Jesus replied to the disciples, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing but never understanding, and you will be ever seeing but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. I see what you mean. Not the most straightforward answer to his disciples.
No, because what he's saying there is, why do I use parables? Not to reveal God's kingdom, but to conceal it. That leaves you sort of scratching your head even a bit more. What's he saying here? He's saying that for people like his disciples who are open-hearted and who want to understand, God gives what he calls the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. They're freely available. But for some of these religious leaders, in particular, the rabbis and the Pharisees and the priests, who think they know it all, and for whom all this stuff is so trivial and beneath them, they miss it. Actually, they harden their hearts by their sort of superior attitude and their dismissing of these simple stories. And you know what? When that happens, Jesus says, that prophecy of Isaiah is getting fulfilled. There'll be a time when people are sort of hearing God, but never understanding, because their hearts have become calloused, hardened. You know, when our skin becomes calloused, it becomes hard, doesn't it, to sort of protect what's underneath. And sometimes we can allow our lives to become calloused in parts. It starts out self-protectively, to protect what we think and what is precious to us, but then it becomes hard and unfeeling. And that's what's happened to the religious leaders in particular. So why do I teach in parables? Jesus said, why do I tell little stories like this about farmers and sowers? Well, on the one hand, to reveal to those who've got an open and inquiring heart, but on the other hand, to conceal from those for whom this is beneath them and too trivial. Quite a challenge still to us today about the heart attitude we have when we come to the teaching of Jesus.
And even perhaps an unbeliever who comes to all of this in a somewhat cynical way, just because they come in that way means it's not going to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you will come with an open heart to say, well, look, I don't believe this stuff, but you know what? Let me look at it open-heartedly. I always encourage people to do that. Look, you may not believe this yet. You may not believe there's a God, but could you read these stories of Jesus and say, God, I don't even know if you're there. I don't even know if I believe in you, but if Jesus is who these Christians claim he is, could you speak to me as I read this? Could you say something to me if you're real and you're there? And God hears that sort of prayer. But if we come with an attitude that says, well, this is all stupid fairy story stuff, is it? That's exactly what you'll see. Stupid fairy story stuff. It never will be anything other than that. Your heart has become calloused like their hands. So keep an open heart. Try and keep a soft and tender heart. And you may be surprised at what God says to you through it.
If somebody does want to give Jesus the benefit of the doubt and read, should we say, a gospel about Jesus, where would you suggest they start?
Well, I think a great gospel to start for us in the West today is perhaps Luke's gospel. Matthew's got lots of references back to the Old Testament, and John's got lots of imagery from the Old Testament. So either Mark, which is short, punchy, fast-moving, Luke, which is just a little slower moving in its pace, digs down a little bit more at time. But one of those is a great gospel to read because it's the story of who Jesus was, what Jesus did, and to come and read just a little section of that each day and to preface it with that prayer, God, if you were there, would you please speak to me? I want to try and have an open heart. Could you please speak to me out of what I'm reading and help me to see who Jesus is and what the message is that he's got for me? What you're doing there is you're opening up your heart to seed coming in. And, wherever people pray that sort of prayer, God's really happy to answer.
Well, Jesus goes on, doesn't he, to explain, I think, this parable of the sower to his disciples.
Yeah, and very unusually so, David, because Jesus doesn't normally explain parables. He just leaves them hanging there. But out of the disciples sort of questioning, so why are we doing this, Jesus? Why are we doing it this way? He not only explains why, he now goes on to interpret this one in some detail for them.
Okay, so I think we're looking at verse 18 now of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 13, where Jesus goes on to say, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. That's interesting that he does then spell it out quite clearly.
Yeah, he really, really wants them to grasp this. We'll come back to this in a moment perhaps, but why is it that Jesus interprets this parable? It's because it's quite a key one. We'll revert to that in a moment. So he unpacks, I think, what, for most of us is fairly obvious in its meaning. Now, there's only one type of seed. Remember, this is the seed of God's word, the seed of God's kingdom. And he says, so what is it? Well, if seed goes on the path, who are the path? Well, that's people who either don't hear or don't understand, they don't want to, they let the devil snatch it away. And so nothing ever comes of that seed. There was nothing wrong with the seed, by the way. The seed is always good. The seed is always the same. But this path represents a heart that it isn't interested. It's hard. It's hardened itself against anything getting in. Rocky ground? Oh, well, that represents people who've heard the message and they say, oh, yeah, I want Jesus, I want that. But they've really not taken any time to let that word get in and develop roots. It was just a quick, oh, yes, I want that blessing, rather than thinking about the implications of it. So when challenges come in life, it's, oh, well, that didn't work, did it? God's not the great Santa Claus in the sky that I thought he was. He brings me whatever I want, whenever I want it. And so that small beginning of faith that was starting to grow shrivels up very quickly because it never was given time to get deep roots into their life. Thorns, Jesus says, oh, that represents those who are choked by the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth. Interesting, isn't it? Still two things today that are big for many people, the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth. Luke adds another one. He talks about worries, riches, and pleasures in his version. So they started to grow. They started to follow Jesus, but they took their eyes off following him, and they either got distracted by the pressures that came against them, the worries of this life, or the attractions of life that wanted to draw them away, wealth, possessions, money, success. And so it just never went anywhere. But then finally, good soil. He said, oh, these are people with a good and understanding heart. Luke's version of this same parable says it's those with a noble heart who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering produce a crop. So this is why God sows his word into our heart. This is why he sows the gospel, the word of the kingdom, into our heart, because his intention is that we should be fruitful. This is not just a vague hope. When a seed is planted into the soil, it is full of potential, full of life. And that's the same with the seed of the kingdom in our own hearts and lives. It's full of potential. Now, what are we going to do with it? It's the condition of our hearts and our heart response that will reflect whether we are fruitful 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown.
So to some extent, there's almost a sort of warning to the disciples as time moves forward that there isn't some sort of magic formula when it comes to all this. People's different reactions, different circumstances can have a bearing on whether they accept entering the kingdom or not.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with the seed. The seed is always good. In this picture, it's the same seed from the same sack that the farmer has sown. The seed is good. Don't doubt that. There's nothing wrong with the seed. It's still powerful. It still works. But people's hearts and the condition of their hearts will make a difference as to how that seed grows, takes, responds, grows or not. And that's something that each of us individually is responsible for. I can't do anything about the condition of your heart. I can encourage you, provoke you, help you to pray and everything else, but only you can watch the condition of your own heart. So I think Jesus is preparing his followers that as he will send them out, and particularly after his death, resurrection, and ascension, he sends them out into the world. The reality is this good gospel seed will meet with different reactions, and that's okay. That's how it will be. It's not that you've done it badly or wrongly. It's all to do with people's hearts and how willing they are to respond to the message.
And to some extent, I suppose the crowd listening to that parable in the first place might have been thinking to themselves, I wonder which sort of category I fall into.
Well, yeah, I think they would. And I think we're meant to. And I think we're meant to look into our own hearts. And if we look and think, do you know what? I've been a Christian 5 years now, 10 years now, 20 years. Where am I now in comparison to when the seed was sown initially? Have I grown? Has there been development? Has there been fruitfulness? Now, we're not comparing me with you. We're comparing me with me. We're saying, what has happened in my own heart? And even there can be different bits of the path and the garden in different areas of our life. It may be that in one area, oh yeah, we've taken the word in really deep. We love that. We really committed to that evangelism. Oh yes, let me get out there. This is what I love. Whoa, deep seed there in my life. Giving, yeah, well, I'm not really sure about that. Does the church really need my money? And really the message of the kingdom has gotten at a very shallow level there.
So what can we do about our heart to make sure the seed is growing in good soil?
Yeah, well, we need to do everything we can to make sure our heart is good and soft and tender. Confession of our sin quickly is a really key part. There's nothing like unconfessed sin that makes us calloused, to go back to that image that Isaiah used, that Jesus quotes from here. He loves quoting from Isaiah, by the way, in this gospel. Sin has a way of, particularly sin when we explain it away. Oh, yeah, I know it's a little failure, but, and it's like a little bit of heart skin grows over it. So the next time it happens, we don't feel it. We're not quite as sensitive to it, and a bit more hard skin grows over it until eventually we're not even aware of it. So I think trying to stay alert to sin, listening to the nudges of the Holy Spirit when he says, hey, that wasn't right, was it? Being open to brothers and sisters and provocation from one another. getting into God's word, not just reading it, but reading it and receiving its challenge and see how we respond to it, getting involved in serving and work, because there's nothing like that, to rubbing shoulders with other people to bring out stuff in our life. So anything and everything we can to keeping soft, tender hearts is really important. And this is important not just at the start of our Christian life. Now, very often, Christians think they've got this parable because they think it's all about, it's a gospel parable. I've heard it described as this is a gospel parable, a gospel preaching parable. Well, it is and it isn't. It is clearly because it's what can happen at the beginning when the gospel is preached. But actually, Jesus intends this to be far wider than just what happens when the gospel is first preached. Because let's just go back to the beginning of his interpretation to his disciples in verse 18. Mm-hmm. He says, "Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, da-di-da-di-da. The message of the kingdom." The Greek literally says there, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom. Now, notice he's not saying when anyone hears the word of the gospel. He could have chosen to say that, but he uses quite a different word. So what Jesus is saying here, this response to the seed is not just about what happens when we first hear the gospel and respond to it. This is a parable about what happens every single time we hear a word of the kingdom. Every single time a word is brought to us throughout our Christian lives, through a sermon, through us reading scripture, through us hearing something on UCB, whatever it might be, every time God brings a word of the kingdom to us, one of these four things will happen. Will happen. And that's why this is such an important parable. And just to go back to what I said a few minutes ago about how this is a really key parable, in Mark's version of this parable, in Mark 4:13, Jesus says to them, "Don't you understand this parable? How then will you understand any parable?" In other words, if you don't grasp the principle in this one, you won't understand anything else. Why? Because what happens in this parable is what happens every time God brings his word to us. It's not just about the gospel. It's about the word of his kingdom, the challenge of living life his way. So if you don't grasp that, if you don't grasp every time you hear a sermon, every time you do a Bible reading, every time you hear some encouragement, if you don't understand at that point, hey, one of four things is going to happen as you hear that. It's either going to go on the path, your heart will be hard, birds will snatch it away, it's going to go in rocky ground, you're not making much room for it to grow and develop. Hey, the worries and cares of this world have choked that one out, haven't they? Or will there be every time good soil, a heart that says, hey, Lord, my heart is open to that word of the kingdom that you've just brought to me. Please, Lord, please let my heart be soft. Please let it be tender. Please, Lord, let that word sink in deep. Please don't let it be snatched away from me. This is not just a gospel parable. It is a kingdom parable. One of these four things will absolutely happen every time God speaks to you. And what makes the difference will be the choice that you make in your heart about the sort of soil that you make available to that seed.
So we've got to watch our hearts all the time.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a really great summary for what this parable is all about. It's the challenge to watch your heart. Watch your heart, not just when you first hear the gospel, but every time our loving Heavenly Father brings a word to us in any and every way. Hey, watch your heart. Because Jesus says, I guarantee you, one of these four things will happen now in response to that word that's come to you. And the challenge is, which of those four will you choose it to be?
And the most amazing thing is that if it is allowing it to fall on good soil, the output, the return he talks about is amazing.
Isn't it incredible? 30, 60, 100 at a time, where 7 or 8 was normal, 15 was fabulous. This is the promise of God. This is not like a get this in your heart because, I'm going to be cross if you don't. This is get living my way into your heart. Get this word into your heart. Why? Because if you will, this will lead to the most fruitful, expansive, fulfilled life you could ever imagine. And just watch what happens in the place where I've put you, if only you will watch your heart and let my word do its work. The return can be amazing.
Bible expert Mike Beaumont explaining the parables of Jesus to David Tavener. Bible Parables in 30 Minutes is just one of a series of podcasts from Mike and David that help to make sense of the Bible, some of them recorded on location in the Holy Land and beyond. You can check them all out on the easy-to-use app UCB Player or wherever you listen to your podcasts.